Alrighty, I got the turbos back on, and I partially mocked up the X5 intake tubes, and I put the, basically I just cut the little 90-degree elbows off with a bandsaw, and we keep these we keep these weld-on aluminum fittings in 1/2-inch NPT. And so I just drilled out the inside of this bore here a little bit till it slipped in, and I'm gonna epoxy those in tomorrow. But what's gonna happen is by the time I get a 90-degree fitting here, it's gonna sit too high. I'm worried about it hitting the hood. So luckily Summit Racing is right down the street from us. Well, I say right down the street. It's like a 25-minute car ride. So I ordered some 90-degree 1/2-inch NPT to -10 fittings. And I'm gonna thread into these little bungs, epoxy them in place where I need them to be, and then that way I can redo the hoses. I'll change probably to either 45s or 120-degree fittings. I haven't decided yet. We'll just have to see how it fits. But so far it's looking promising. I went ahead and pulled off the whole front bumper. I pulled off the fake radiator grill and the shroud and all that, just to see how much room we're working with. And it looks like I can barely squeeze in some 3-inch tubing in there. I'm gonna have to kind of dent the sides a little bit to get it to fit through all the way. So I'll figure that one out here in a bit. But so far it's looking pretty promising to get some front-facing intakes into the bumper. So this is where the factory air box gets air scavenged through those little things. Scoops it in from there, through that, and then goes into the underside of the air box. So we're gonna eliminate that whole circuit. I already checked the mass airflow sensor harness is long enough to fit. I've got some fittings, I've got some math flanges for the BMWs, and it fits a few other GM ones as well, but that's the correct mass airflow flange for this. It says a Camaro flange, but it's actually GM uses a lot of Bosch OEM components. So yeah, we're gonna get test fitting and fabricating and seeing if we can get some intakes going. Well, it is about 11:15 and I'm calling it a night. I made some progress on the intake setup. I like the way it's shaping out. You kind of see I've got a tube in there, partially mocked up. So I bought a universal kit on Amazon, just 3-inch piping, with U-bends. I cut the U-bends in angled sections, so I could kind of just fit and maneuver as needed. So it looks promising. I've got to pick up a few fittings from Summit in the morning, and I think I'm going to look at those. I'm also going to look at those things that you cover the air filters with to keep it from getting waterlogged. That's probably going to be a pretty important piece as well. So I'm wrapping it up for the night, and we'll pick back up tomorrow morning. Alright, I got an update on the intake so far. I'm really happy with how it's turning out, with the exception of, in good old me being a cheap-ass fashion, I decided to save $10 by buying non-polished aluminum tubing instead of the standard polish kit that I go for, and it welds like absolute shit. So you can kind of see a terrible weld in there. Luckily I have enough like 45s and a couple of other odds and ends laying around the shop, even if it's just used material. I'm gonna powder coat it anyways, so I'm not super worried with how it looks, but I am gonna try to sand that down a little bit and see if I can get some of the impurities out of it. And if not, I'll just remake the whole piece now that I kind of know what the dimensions need to be. But I went ahead and I was proactive with getting actual polished, decent tubing for up here, because I got to weld the mass airflow flange, which I'm going to locate about here. I've got my X5 intake tubes on, and what I had to do here is, this is actually a 3.5 diameter inlet, but if you take a piece of silicone coupler, I cut it down on the bandsaw, it actually fills up the slack and clamps down real nice, so it goes all the way through here. I did have to trim this little bit here. I have the body strut removed right now. That's a secondary concern. Worst case scenario, I can just remake it if I have to, or modify it, however, make it fit. But so far, like I said, I'm really happy with how it's turning out. So I'm gonna get the mass airflow flange welded and then start mocking up the other side. I gotta trim these down a little bit and test fit the filter, see how they fit. And then I'm actually gonna powder coat all of this. I think we're gonna do textured red. I need to just make sure I have textured red. And yeah, so we're gonna keep trucking along. Okay, I totally remade that pipe. That came out terribly, so much nicer weld. I've got my mass airflow sensors marked and preliminary mock-up on the intakes with the grill air diverter panel back in, or air shroud, whatever you want to call it. Everything so far looks like it's going to clear. I still haven't put the struts back in, so we're going to see how those fit. I think the next step for me is I'm going to locate the mass airflow flanges, weld them, and do all the finish welding on everything, and then I think I'm pretty much ready to powder coat it and finish putting the rest of the car back together. I still got to do the catch cans. So I had a temporary setup. I actually did that last month, but it wasn't worth filming. It was it went downhill quick. I tried to get everything to clear the factory air boxes, and it just wasn't happening. Looked terrible. It was functional, but it looked terrible. So I'm actually, like, now that I have all this apart, I'm actually going to redo it, and now I can locate the catch cans to probably one for each bank, like here and here, so it has a cleaner, sleeker look. I'm gonna get finished up on the mass airflow flanges, and then we're gonna weld this whole thing together. Okay, I just got done. I got everything finish welded. I got the matte flanges oriented. I've got them powder coated, and they're baking in the oven. So I went with a nice textured red. It's gonna take a little bit for this thing to get up to temp. So that's all of the charge pipes right now. We're doing an epoxy textured red. So we're waiting for the component temp has to be 375, and then from there we set the timer. We're baking it for 10 minutes. And we talked about this in a previous episode, but you know, we do offer full powder coating here. And so this is kind of what it looks like. It's a mess in here right now because we've been rocking and rolling. It's fully ventilated, so it has a suction system that keeps everything from getting hopefully distributed throughout the whole shop. I think about the only revision I need to make is I need to actually make a fan shroud that dumps it downward, because we're still getting a little bit of airborne powder. It's nowhere near as bad as it used to be. I mean, I was seeing powder at the shipping dock. That's how bad it was when it was circulating through the whole shop before we actually built this room. So that's where we're at on that. But yeah, I'm just waiting for the powder to bake there. And then I've also got the X5 intake tubes. I got the bungs epoxied. I went ahead and located my 90-degree fittings. I'm just waiting for the epoxy to dry while we wait for the charge pipes to bake. And I can actually put it all the way back together now. All right, we have cold air intakes and catch cans. So this is gonna be version 2 of my prototype. Initially, I had a Y fitting that splits the vacuum signal out of the valve cover and split it across both catch cans. And then I also had check valves that would close under boost and transition to pre-turbo suction. But I wasn't really happy with it, and it wasn't drawing enough vacuum on the crankcase through the cans, because the cans also had a massive hose going to the intake tubes, and there was no check valve like factory setup. So I split it up this time. I've got one catch can with vacuum coming out of the lower port of the valve cover, sucking PCV out of the top port of the valve cover, and then on that side, I have both pre-turbo suction hoses going to the catch can, and then I have the can pulling on this side on the left-hand bank. All the data I've been able to find on these PCV systems has been for like the non-technical N63. So there's very little information on the first technical update of the N63. I was able to track down some dealer like training manuals. I read through those, and from my understanding, the way it works is there's a cyclone baffle type system inside this cylinder head. It's actually attached to the valve cover, and the cylinder head itself actually has vacuum ports in the intake runners that feed to that cyclone, which is supposed to separate oil, keep it from getting sucked in the intake. So there's no like actual dedicated intake manifold vacuum source for the PCV system on this. So I had to kind of do a lot of research and improvise. So this is version 2. I'm gonna see how well it does, coupled with these new turbos. And I'm almost ready to start it up. Yeah, I'm gonna do a first start and kind of make sure nothing pours out fluid-wise and see how it runs. Oh, here goes nothing. Well, I got a misfire, so we're gonna see what that is. Alrighty, I just got done road testing it, got it up to operating temp. The misfire was just hell, I don't know, it's a BMW. I cleared all the trouble codes, and then it had a little bit of a rough idle after that. So I actually learned the hard way from the injector fiasco, and I used my factory ISTA scanner, and I cleared the adaptive learning values. And after that, any of the drivability stuff that it was doing went away. So yeah, so that's how it looks completed. I got the PCV system finalized, so I'm just gonna roll with that, see how it does for the next week or so. You know, keep checking the catch cans, making sure it's actually picking up oil. You know, just monitor things, because like I said, this is kind of a new experimental setup I'm going with, but I did verify the crankshaft is getting pulled under vacuum now. I should still be good with crankcase vacuum, or crankcase ventilation with the turbos pulling, so we'll, you know, I'll make sure that I keep checking that can to make sure that oil vapor is actually still getting in it. So if you're going to be doing a set of these intakes, you know, I don't know if I'm going to offer these for sale, because it's not 100% OE fit like I like. You know, it does require modifying the vehicle quite a bit, but I guess if I get enough interest, you know, like the Lexus community, maybe we'll make a small production run. But if you decide to go with X5 intake tubes, this charge pipe hose hits a little bit and kind of tweaks the boot, so I gotta figure out what I'm gonna do about that. I may see if I can take this apart and maybe weld it with a slightly upward angle. You know, I don't know, I gotta play around with it. Of course, you delete all the factory air boxes, you have to modify the PCV system. This hose also doesn't clear the fuel vapor hose for the purge system, so I just snipped it and ran some vacuum hose over that for now. I may try to fabricate an actual nice proper hose. I've got to find all the materials for it. I showed you earlier where you had to trim in the bumper. None of the body struts fit now, so I'll probably just make my own out of some plate steel later on or something. You know, for these two, and then the ones down there, but honestly, I don't think it's a huge deal. So intakes have been also doing really great. The catch cans have been doing really well. I've been checking those, and you know, they're actually capturing oil like they're supposed to. I still haven't cleaned up the bracketry. I'm gonna actually come up with a nice like mounting system for that. But yeah, so far, you know, these fittings with the epoxy have held up to the heat. Overall, I'm very satisfied with everything and how it turned out. Intakes have been doing great. Driven in the rain a few times, haven't had any issues. And when I was driving in the rain, it was at highway speeds. If you're watching this and you think this is something you might be interested in buying, you know, if we can get enough interest, we will offer these intakes up for sale. I just got to come up with a way to template these properly. You know, if you're watching this video and you are interested in nice powder-coated front-facing intakes, you know, we'd offer them with the modified boots and everything for your PCV system, catch cans, all that. Just basically the working setup that we have. Let us know in the comments if this is something you're interested in.